You're listening to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. In this episode, we'll be listening to Social Responsibility in Children's Bookselling, a session that was presented at Children's Institute 2024 in New Orleans.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is Social Responsibility in Children's Bookselling. We're going to get started. But first, let's thank our lead sponsor, Ingram, and the other sponsors of the event. Of course, the app has all the handouts and also evaluations. That is very important for programming for next year, so please rate this session and all the sessions. This session is being recorded, so when we get to the Q&A, make sure to wait for the mic. We have the two mics in front, and we'll bring a mic to you. But it's important that everything is recorded. And of course, silence your cell phones. So, and the antitrust guidelines, we should all be familiar at this point. No talk of pricing, boycotts, dividing up a market. So we're going to talk about community engagement. We're going to talk about working within systems, etc. So we're just going to get started. First, we'll start with introductions and what social responsibility means with our stores. And since I'm talking, I'll continue. Hi, I'm Sweet Pea Flaherty. I own King's Books in Tacoma, Washington. We're about a 4,000 square foot store in a community of 220,000. We are a general interest bookstore, but we have a focus on promoting queer, trans, BIPOC, and disabled authors. We take community engagement very seriously. We have a lot of organizations that we work with, from events to 3 of our book clubs are run by community organizations, book ordering, etc. We work with schools, specifically several school librarians, and also work to crowdfund books for classroom sets for the library and giveaways for events. And then we also work with the literacy organization that gives books to incarcerated youth. They used to have a book club, but since the pandemic, haven't been allowed in the facility. So now we just shower them with books. So yeah, that's a little background in King's Books and me. If everyone else wants to introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Latanya, Devaughn, and I'm the founder of Bronx Books. Our goal is to make book ownership affordable and accessible to everyone in our borough, and we operate out of a bookmobile that travels to different schools, shelters, and hospitals. When an organization requests our services, we have like a bus rental, like when you rent the ice cream truck to come to your venue or your block party or whatever it is. They rent the bus, and when a school rents a bus, the books are free. Or an organization rents the bus, the books are free. And we're in our community. We listen to what the organizations in our community say they want to do, and we approach them with their language to assure that they're being held accountable for what they want to promise to our community. So that's a little bit of our story.
Hello. Okay. I have a teacher voice, so this is... Hi, everyone. My name is Pranoo Kumar. I am the owner, founder, and education leader of Rohi's Readery. Before I even share about the question, I want to honor my grandmother, who the bookstore is named after, Rohini, as well as my older child. And Rohini was an education activist, so she fought for children's rights and the emancipation of women's rights during colonized rule. So paying honor to the ancestors and those who've come before us really doing this work. What does social responsibility mean? For Rohi's Readery, everything that we do is really focused around community voice. What is it that the community wants? How do we facilitate experiences around the love of authentic literature? Rohi's Readery is a social justice-driven children's bookstore and learning center in West Palm Beach, Florida. Florida, that's all. There you go. So in the past 3 years of being open, as of next week, it'll be 3 years. Thanks. We will have established over 175 partnerships and developed and executed more than 400 free events for the community. So there's really this voice of the community, whether it is in a NICU unit in providing books that are reflective of our babies, whether it is at a school space, whether it is at a hotel that is asking for a diverse and inclusive library for their game room. We're listening to wherever and whatever you want. We want to provide it, and authentically. So that's us.
Y'all, I went to that Scholastic party last night, and I had that boozy snow cone. And I am, like, so tired, so I hope my words, like, come out and make sense today for you. So my name is Tanvi Rastogi. My pronouns are she, her. I work at Dog-Eared Books in Ames, Iowa. Population is about 70,000, and, like, literally half of that is actually students at Iowa State University. It is a predominantly white college town that has some diversity as a result of having a university there. So I'm going to talk a little bit first about what social responsibility means to me, and then I'm going to tell you about the work that I do. I feel like a little bit like the panel imposter here because my work is very different than my amazing colleagues over here. So social responsibility for me is the same regardless of where I'm working or whatever profession I'm in. And it's basically, how do we be responsible to each other? How do we take care of each other? How do we create belonging for each other? And in a bookstore and in a library, I'm a former young adult librarian. I worked in public librarianship for 15 years before moving into bookselling. I think we also have a responsibility to bring our community members along with us. So how do we teach our community members to be responsible to each other? How do we provide them with tools to help take care of each other and understand the importance of that? Coming from both a library background and now a bookselling background, I want to talk for a second about empathy. I think in both worlds, we do a lot of back patting about the books that we put into people's hands, especially in a community like mine, which is predominantly white, and the empathy that we're helping people develop through these books. And I think that's a half measure on our part, because just because people are reading these diverse books doesn't necessarily mean that they're developing empathy. And if they are developing that empathy, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're doing anything with it. I think it's a lot easier to feel empathy in your heart than it is to actually practice it in your daily life. So on that note, I have an organization. It's a nonprofit organization that I started called Good Books, Young Troublemakers. It is a book club for middle schoolers that's built on the idea that we can actually teach people how to be good allies. We can teach people how to learn how to raise their voices in real life. Those are actually skills that I think we all think we have, but are actually really difficult to practice. And there are skills that I believe can be strengthened over time with regular practice, the same way you'd practice like baseball or violin. You can actually strengthen your voice with practice. So in this book club, we use diverse, representative middle grade books that help kids not only develop empathy, but also provide practice opportunities for kids to actually like role play speaking up so that when they need to do it in real life, they're aware, because you have to be aware to speak up. They are confident, they are effective, and they are ready to do it like immediately in the moment that they experience a harm in the world, which is every day. So I have a chapter that I run at Dog-Eared Books. It's been going for 3 years with middle schoolers, and then there are also several chapters across the country in all different types of communities. I think I can't talk about money, but if you want to sign up, please hit me up later, because anyone can have a chapter, and I think every place should.
So next we're going to jump into something we all touched on, community engagement. So if everyone wants to talk about how you kind of build community partnerships, how you assess your community's need, and how you create programs that work for your community.
So I like to meet my community at a school. So these are the same people that I'll see when a hospital rents it and we're parked in front of the hospital, or when we're at the farmer's market. So we build that trust in the school, since it's a safe space and they believe that everything, that you see at the school, it's safe and accessible at the school. So when they see me parked on the street, they're like, there's that bus, I can trust it. I met her at a school and it was fun and she had all these great books. Mom or dad, let's go there, or grandparents, let's go there. So for me, meeting my community at the schools built such a tremendous trust, because seeing a bookmobile on the streets of New York, before it was painted white, and it was a strange white bus with books, and I'm trying to get people to come on, before it was spray painted all beautiful, I had to build that trust. And for me, finding the community members at our schools was the way. And then parents work other places, so their children would come home and say, this book bus came, and they would Google, and they're like, hey, can you come to my job? Or can you do this? Can you do that? So, and then meeting community members at farmers markets. Can you come to my school? So it was that back and forth, and just being in the community. And they say that they want more kids to read. What better way to get them to read, by bringing someone in from their community with books on a bus to give them for free. So
when I think about community, it's interesting because when people come into Rohi's Readery, I have people of all ages, even though on Google and certain places it'll say a children's bookstore, right? But what I have found in the 3 years is that I have as many adults who don't have kids coming in because they are seeking community. They're seeking connection, seeking safety, in however you define that. But for example, when we first opened, my background is early childhood and elementary education with a focus on identity-driven learning and decolonizing curriculum. So when I first started, I had newborn all the way up to around middle grade books. And then I found so many kids coming in, so many teens, so many queer, trans, BIPOC teens coming in, so many adults coming in. But at first it was a lot of teens coming in saying, hey, could you start like a teen section? Or I would have teens coming in just sitting and reading picture books, right? And then I had more adults coming in and literally connecting with their inner child, healing the inner child. And that was one of the reasons why I opened the bookstore and learning center, was because I had experienced so many, I am a proud immigrant, a queer person of the global majority, and was someone that had experienced a tremendous amount of racism and discrimination in my family as well. We moved from India to Texas in the 80s, and so every time that I'm thinking about someone coming in, I want to hear their story. What is it that you want? Because that's in a way connecting with this inner child of what something that I'm trying to right the wrong of for my ancestors and for my own family, right? And so it started out like that, and then now there are so many adults. Now we have both children and adult events. So we have cooking, gardening, dance, music, story time, all of those like beautiful things, revolutionary readers. We say we read something, we learn something, we share it with the world. We read something, we learn something, we share it with the world. There you go. It'll catch on. And I guarantee you. But that actually started with our Revolutionary Readers Club, right? But our adults were coming in, and so we created classes like creative and healing writing. We started a QT BIPOC sip and paint called Shades and Strokes. We started community connections because we had so many people who are also moving down south, anywhere from West Palm to Miami, and saying, I just moved here. I don't know anyone. I'm looking for a community, but I don't want to have to pay for an awkward networking session. I want to find people who are like-minded and feel the same philosophy and passion, and whether you're talking or not in the group. So now we have a whole adult series. So I think it's just been when someone comes in, whether they're just sitting and breathing and being, or whether they're talking to you, like finding something that you can facilitate if they want in your community engagement. Yeah.
Sweet Pea, what was the question? I'm really
it's
on the
about
struggle
community
bus.
engagement, how you build those partnerships, and kind of assess community needs.
Great, okay.
Yeah.
So I work predominantly with kids, middle schoolers. My book club right now is kids between the ages of 10 and 16, because I have a couple high schoolers that like refuse to graduate out of the book club, which is lovely. So my whole background for 20 years actually has been working with kids. Most of that time was with middle schoolers and high schoolers. And I found in my work that a lot of kids, not all kids, but a lot of kids are really, really hungry for opportunities to talk about what they're experiencing in their school and in their community, what they're seeing on the news and social media about like the political happenings of their state. I mean, we live in Iowa, so there's a lot happening in our state and in our country and in our world. And increasingly with the state of public education, especially in a state like ours, those spaces, they really like don't exist, right? So maybe they're talking in their own families sometimes, but otherwise they have no space. And in the book club, we relate everything that we talk about back to things that are actually happening in the real world. They're very curious. The other thing that I found working with kids for so long, so as a YA librarian who worked in a library with a dedicated teen space, I was spending like literally hours every single day with these kids. And they would come in and they'd be like, Tanvi, I heard someone in the hallway at school using the N-word. And I'd be like, that is really terrible. What did you do? And like 9 times out of 10, the answer was, well, I didn't do anything. They really, really needed to be able to engage in conversation around what should you be doing and why should you be doing it? Why is it important? What is the impact of not doing anything? They really wanted opportunities to figure out what to do. And so that's how I engage my community, which really is children, in the work that I do.
And I wanted to talk a little bit about going cold with an organization that you like don't have a contact with. Sometimes it's you just haven't found the right person with the organization. Sometimes they don't have the capacity, much like a bookstore. And so it's definitely a long game. I generally start by subscribing to the newsletter or RSS feed on the website over social media for reasons that will become clear in a second. And then pay attention to events, festivals, fundraisers, and show up as a person and interact with the community, whatever kind of community it is, and engage with people. And then if you think it makes sense, because some events are very intra and some are community facing, and if it's the latter and it seems like your bookstore would work, then when the newsletter comes with the call to vendors, sign up, and then you have to do work to do a deep dive and come up with new authors and topics that you haven't heard. And I always adjure everyone to please bring fun books. Everyone loves books about colonialism, but we love slutty books and books about mythology, etc. And then that first time you do the event, take extensive notes. You pretty quickly figure out the gaps in your collection, that you didn't bring any asexual books to Pride, or whatever it is. Take note of the books that people are excited you brought and books that they wish you brought. And if you didn't hit the mark, go back next time with a better curated collection. And it's laborious the first time you do it, but then you bring those books back to your store and it better represents your community. So that's been useful to me. And also don't think of it as, reaching a new demographic or like a market share. It's added value for your customers. I don't think most of my customers knew about the annual Buddhist Street Fair or the Tribe's Pride event, but it was very fun to see them show up like wide-eyed, like, is this a thing that happens? Yes, every year. Keep up. But it's like you're beyond like engaging with new communities and reaching new readers. You're making your store represent your community better, and you're also you're also helping your customers engage with new communities, which is important.
Just to add on what you said, we have a botanical garden in the Bronx that our community didn't, a lot of people that I came across didn't realize that it was there and it was accessible to them. After the pandemic, any resident in the Bronx can go for free. So I was selling books at the farmer's market and letting people know when I wasn't at that particular farmer's market that they can go to the botanical gardens. And they're like, we have one? We can go there? I rode by on the bus and I never knew, or I never thought to stop there. I'm gonna go there. And then I would see them when I was there the next time. So just spreading the word and letting people know what's in our community, what's available, and what's for them, even if it doesn't have anything to do with your bookstore.
Yeah. And I think the more community engagement, the more people are going to say, do you know this organization? Have you tried to sell this event? Because, none of us have the time to like win community. And there's also no way to know all of the different organizations in your community, but then you can kind of build your circle organically rather than, trying to do it all at once. Yeah, go.
I love that. Hello. I love that you're saying that because I always think of this idea that, and I remember someone said this to me, and they said, liberation lacks in isolation. And just this idea that even if it may not, well, I feel like literacy in some way always ties into something, but, being able to facilitate experiences where maybe it's not happening in the moment, but being able to say, oh, here's an awesome resource, or maybe we can collaborate. And, while there's one example, we're doing a storytelling, but we're doing Vogue dancing in a record painting party and listening to like queer BIPOC artists. And it's for kids and adults, but it was like storytelling, voguing, painting. But there's these amazing individuals who are doing their things and trying to build their companies, their brands, their organizations. But how can we all come together and like support one another so that then this is a bigger event, but then you're also tapping into the intersection of multiple identities too. And that's so huge because oftentimes we see things in separation where there's such intersectionality, especially within marginalized communities, and where you see higher levels of oppression based on those intersectionalities. So thank you for bringing that up. Yeah.
Next, we'll talk a little bit about working in existing systems and systems that might be not welcoming. A lot of, schools and governments are obviously bureaucracies, and so sometimes it's very hard to work through them. So how have you worked through systems that, might be resistant to being worked through and kind of whatever, done things to push through?
I can take that one, yeah. So I think like all of the work I do is kind of in the system. So Iowa's just a mess, and they've got like all kinds of weird like book banning bills and like anti-queer bills. It's a state that's experiencing like significant attacks on intellectual freedom in the form of book bans and restrictions on what educators can talk about in their classrooms. And so with my book club, what's really cool, so I have a chapter in very rural, conservative Iowa in a town. The school district serves actually 6 different communities. Like the towns are that small. And so there's a teacher in the school. So GBYT creates discussion materials so that you don't have to. And there's a teacher who's using the program in her school. And the only reason she's allowed to offer it is because it's during like a plus period that's optional for kids to sign up for. So she's got like a dozen middle schoolers coming to this book club, and they're able to talk about things like gender identity. One of the books that we're reading is Sir Callie and the Champions of Helston, which is explicitly about gender identity. And this teacher was like, these kids would never have had this conversation otherwise, not only in school, but like not in their families and actually not anywhere else in the community. And it's only because the book club is able to kind of circumvent the law that way. And the especially cool thing is that she was like, well, they don't know anything about gender identity, but also I don't know anything about gender identity. And so she's able to actually use the materials to learn alongside the kids. And she was like, it's really important that we are able to offer this. Some of the other things that we have talked about using our books is like, what is linguistic racism? And why do we associate moral inferiority with people who don't speak English or speak English with certain accents? What is fat phobia? Why do we associate moral superiority with thinness? What is accessibility? Like, these are children who are having these conversations. These kids. So I feel like the work that you all do is like, you're working within your communities, and it's very life-giving and probably in some cases life-saving. And what I'm doing, I think, is like the opposite side of the coin to that, which is like recognizing that we all still have to exist outside of those liberated spaces as well. And what I'm hoping is to raise community members who make those outside spaces, those non-liberated spaces, safer for all of us, all 4 of us, all of you in this room, all of our community members. So it's very much working within a system, but hopefully, since my mission is to create belonging, I think all of us, every single one of us, has a responsibility to create belonging, and that's what these kids are learning how to do.
Yeah, and I'd say for me, it's definitely about building relationships. You never know who that person is that's going to solve your problem. Like, we had a big author and we needed a venue, so we had to work with the school system, and I started with my troublemaker school librarians. But then it was like a book, oh my God, what is the political book? School board, thank you. I just like, it would come to me. The book, the school board member who I was friends with because we used to do a queer and trans book club together, and then turns out she meets with the school superintendent every week and got me an intro, and because of the relationships and reputation, we were able to like secure the venue for no cost and all of this kind of relationship that if coming from the outside, it would have been both laborious and expensive, and it's just like the relationships we built. And then I'm not going to go off on a tangent, but like working with people who just have crazy ideas, and you just kind of like throw everything at the wall and see what sticks to figure out some solutions or something. Like, we get a grant from the city every year, that's $6,000 to make giant art with steamrollers, because we work with letterpress printers and book artists. And so I think finding the troublemakers and working with them, you never know what kind of wild things you'll pull off.
I became a vendor for the Department of Education, and that was one way. And then I'm working with different districts. Next year we'll be planning the first annual literary festival for that school district. And just knowing the people, listening to what the chancellor is saying, and going back to the schools and say, hey, did you hear what the chancellor said? He said reading is important. So let's, so because I know they heard it, so I want them to know that I'm aware. And I also go to community board meetings. I can't fix the system per se, but I've built trust with the people that make decisions, and they bring me in that way. So I think that was my biggest asset, is gaining trust.
One of the things around the idea of, like, we can't fix a system, but the system was intentionally created that way. And it's not just recent. Book bans did not just recently happen. This has been happening forever. This has been happening with curriculum for a very long time. On a personal level, it is frustrating sometimes to see the profiting of the word banned, because I'm trying to reframe the language where it's not. It was not created to be banned. It was created to be liberatory. And so even just the language that we're using within the bookstore, when people come in and they're asking for a banned book, I'm like, well, we actually have liberatory books. We have joyful experiences. We have beautiful stories of historically marginalized communities. And these are stories that have been intentionally oppressed in silence, not just in the last 4 years, not since 2020. This has been happening for a very long time. So I think just also reframing the language, because people like to hop on a trend. And then there was a really great podcast I listened to around like the marketing of the Black Lives Matter movement and banned books and all of these things, and how like now you see people completely disengaging, or what's even worse, people who have just started putting, and this, I think about this in bookselling, have just started putting out books for the sake of saying, we're putting out this and we're putting out that. But like, have you ever had a conversation with someone reflective of that book? Or have you ever engaged in DEIA consulting or work beyond like one workshop, right? Have you been really able to see that? Because I think that we take care of us. And so even with all of these systems that continuously happen and are intentionally put there, what are we doing in our communities to keep us safe? Because unfortunately, like, I think that it's going to take a long time. And people who've come before us, I keep saying that because I just want us to be reminded of that. Yeah, sorry, I think I went off on a tangent. But all that to say is that I think that the way that we can work around systems is really like seeing each other for who we are and not seeing it as like a sale or something to be, or the numbers or things like that.
And lastly, for our initial questions, how do you measure success, measure impact, and kind of how does that inform how you move forward?
I have a kid in my book club who's 10 years old. Okay, this kid is so shy. She's so sweet. She's a brilliant writer. She is going to be starting 6th grade in the fall. She goes to a school where kids routinely chant, Build the Wall. So we read a book called Hope in the Valley by Mathali Perkins, which is lovely. It's a book about affordable housing, which sounds so boring, but the book is actually so good. The kids loved it. So using that book, we were able to talk about why are the kids saying this? What is the implication of it? They're just saying words, but what do those words actually mean? How are they impacting kids at your school? And then the most important part, which is a part of every single book club discussion we have, is what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it when you're on the playground and you hear it? Right? Not what are you going to do about it later when you're talking about it with us, but what are you going to do about it when you hear it in that moment? Because that's when it matters the most. And this happens all the time at her school. And she came up with a plan. She did it. She talked to the adults at her school about how it was really irresponsible of them for them to not be interrupting it. Yeah. She wrote a letter to her school principal. She talked to her friends about why it mattered. And so she and all her friends together, because their voices are stronger and easier to use together, confront kids when they hear them saying build the wall. And that's really, really sophisticated for a 10-year-old. Because of book club, my kids start coaching each other. They almost don't even need me anymore because we've been doing it for 3 years, and a lot of the kids have been in it for the full 3 years. So at a meeting about a month ago, one of the kids was like, okay, my family is going to a graduation party in a couple of weeks, and the person, there's a kid there who has recently come out as trans, and has shared with us their name and their pronouns. And I know for certain that there's going to be adults there who intentionally misgender and use the incorrect name for this child. And I'm ready to talk about the tactics that I'm going to use for when it's intentional and the tactics I'm going to use for when it's not. So these are really sophisticated conversations that they're having. They're helping each other brainstorm. They know that it matters that they speak up immediately. And that, to me, it blows my mind, like, literally every day. I think it's so important that these conversations happen with kids now, because I don't know about the rest of you or any of you, but I have been in organizations where it's like you're trying to have these DEI conversations with your staff, and it is hard. And change, like, if it happens really slowly. It often actually moves backwards. And imagine a future in which you have organizations and the people coming in already know it. Right? Like, that would change everything for an organization, right? Like, we shouldn't be teaching people these things as adults. We should be teaching them when they're little, because A, they can handle it. B, they want to know what they should be doing. And C, it will have a major impact. And I can imagine it. We're not in the future yet. But I am certain that it's going to have a huge impact when they're in high school and college and starting their careers and raising their own families.
And for me, the success, like, it isn't necessarily something that is measurable right away. It's definitely representation. Like, when we do school book fairs, we make the librarians work for, especially the first time we're working with them. And then it's like you're at the book fair and there's a kid that, like, you can't tell that the character on the cover is Cambodian, but they can tell instantly by the way they're sitting or the author's last name. And then, we've had times where there's schools that, like, I know in Tacoma in this school that Black actually means African immigrant, and so we have a bunch of books, and then when the families see those books, they kind of lose their mind. And similarly in store, when people come in and it's like Filipino American Heritage Month and they see our display and just start crying because they've never seen books, that's it for me.
So I feel like in bookselling or providing books for the community, the impact is almost immediate because they tell you. Readers love to tell you. Like, they loved what they read. They went home. They couldn't sleep because they were reading it. So our goal is to make book accessible, right? So when a school rents the bus, they get 3 books. The students get 3 books. A book that they know they're going to love, a book that they're curious about, and a book that they would have never read if they were paying for it. This gives them the opportunity to explore other authors or different genres or learn something new. So once I had an opportunity to consult a middle school for their in-class libraries. So it was 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and it was 12 classrooms, and I assisted the teacher to put different books in there and things like that, and I thought it was going to be it. And then at the end of the semester, I was invited to speak to the students, and they were able to give me the feedback on the books that I'd chosen for them. And that was worth more than the money that they paid me to do it, because it made me feel like, okay, I know what I'm doing. I'm doing something, that's impactful, and I was able to hear the feedback, and it was something that I will never forget.
I love that. Sorry, all of this. So Rohi's Readery is really, the goal is for it to really be led by our youth. And so we have 2 high school paid interns who have just taken on the role of loving on this space and loving on every single human that comes in whatever capacity that looks like. They've just taken such ownership of it, but not only that, we have volunteers as young as 5 and 6 years old who have been coming now for almost 3 years now. They come every Thursday. They do all the things, but now they are having conversations with our high schoolers, and you're seeing this multi-generational experience. And now one of those 5 and 6 year olds who started out, her grandfather now comes and he volunteers. And so you're just seeing this beautiful experience. And what I love about that is that, yes, the books are incredibly important, but they are a conduit to human connection. And I'll just say personally, I'm probably going to get into trouble for this, but growing up, I did not like reading. I hated it because I never saw myself, or I was always given a book that just did not feel connected. And so now the point of success for me is not only that, but then also now I'm starting to reflect and think, oh my gosh, I'm starting to love reading because I'm around babies who are teaching me to love reading because they love themselves, because they love what they're seeing in their books. So just a full circle of that.
All right, so now we'll go to Q&A. There's 2 mics in the front, and if you need, if you need the mic to come to you.
I love that you were ready.
Thank y'all so much for coming and speaking so openly, authentically about some of the things you guys are going through. Pranoo, you kind of touched on this about coming as an immigrant and being a person of color. As a Black woman and people of color, how do you mentally, personally deal with some of the things that you go through in our lovely community, especially I'm in Louisiana, so I understand Florida, we're struggling. How do you compact mentally of what you have to go through as a Black woman and as a person of color?
Therapy helps. No, really no. So at the bookstore, we've definitely gotten our fair share of death threats, our emails, hateful mail. We've had people come in personally, like up in my face, coming after me. I think this may sound, now I'm losing my words. Basically, yes, it's so hard. There are days that feel so hard, but then I remember community, and I am allowing community to take care of me. And that was really hard for me because as an immigrant, like I've seen when my parents tried doing that and then they got screwed over many times. And so I am sort of learning and unlearning. And so a lot of the adults who don't have kids and those who do have actually come in and have actually become family. Like, take care of I have a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old, and they take care of my babies. And someone said this to me. They said, because I teach her all the things, I have such a grip sometimes on the bookstore and space. I'm so protective of it. But someone said, why don't you let community take care of your bookstore like they take care of your children? And that was huge for me to think, okay, I need to consciously think about that because community will be there for you in a heartbeat. So that has been one thing. And then just allowing my children and the children around us to see our emotions play out. And they have such beautiful ways of also helping you navigate some of that too, because they are brilliant and they have capacity and they know the words and they know the things. And I have my phone, I'll show you really quickly. On the back of my phone, these are notes from my high schoolers. We have a Post-it wall, and anytime someone is going through something, you're brilliant. You got this. Don't let them say, they're like, don't let the haters get you. I'm like, all right, don't let them. But visuals, all the things. So I hope that helps. Yeah. Thank you.
I wanted to say something to you. So at first, I became, I own this business and I'm running the business. I have to do all the things and all the things I have to do, right? So someone said, your vision is so beautiful and the work that you do is so beautiful. Other people want to experience that. So if you let people help you, they can experience that joy and that love right along with you. So.
I'm gonna answer that too. Actually, it wasn't directed to me, but my family is also South Asian. My parents immigrated to the United States. The reason that I do the work I do around belonging is because I grew up in a single mom home. My father died when I was really little. And my mom never got to achieve belonging in the United States, so she actually left. She moved back to India, and so my family is very cleaved. So all of my family is in India, and then my sister and I live in the United States alone. And it's really difficult to grow up as a child and see your parent be so vulnerable because they are not allowed to belong in this place that they have moved to. And so for me, I channel that energy into literally every single thing I do, which is like probably not super healthy, I'm gonna be totally honest, but I derive so much hope from watching, from using the tools at my disposal, which is my background, my education, and books, because I'm literally surrounded by books. That's what I do. I've been in libraries, I've been in a bookstore, and I think that books can do so much more than what we usually do with them. I think it's so easy to put a book into someone's hands. I don't want to discount the effort that takes, but I think we can do way more with books than what we're currently doing. And seeing the way that it's growing people into people who are also learning how to create belonging for maybe someone like my mom is so beautiful. And it propels me literally every single day.
We have about 2 minutes left, and we have 2 more questions in the room. So
I'll try to be really quick. I wondered if you could each speak to how your specific location helps to foster community. My bookstore is actually moving from a large shopping plaza. It's actually going more rural to a small town, but we're also going from a place that none of the other businesses wanted to hand out Halloween candy to a place that has festivals every month and things like that. So I wondered as to how your specific location, even if you're in a red state or something that's difficult, how you maybe have found a space that is really how it helps foster that community.
In the Bronx, New York, we didn't have many bookstores. Right now, there's actively one brick and mortar bookstore, and there are some people emerging with their own bookstore concepts. I'm a bookmobile that's actually, going out in the community. There was a need there, so people were thirsty for the books. A major bookstore left in 2016, leaving our borough of 1.8 million people with no bookstore whatsoever. So the need was there, so that's how I can answer that.
Yeah, similarly, we are the only children's bookstore in our area. There is one, a smaller one, but it's across the bridge. And interestingly, you saying this, so we're doing the same thing right now. We just want to bid with the city to purchase a property in a historic Black community, the historic Northwest District. Yay! Come visit. And right now we're in a shopping plaza. But we're moving 5 minutes north in a community that has the 3 lowest performing schools in the entire Palm Beach County, which is the 3rd largest county in Florida. And so, but with that, even with that 5-minute move, the demographic, everything. So it's really thinking strategically once again. I'm going to listen. What may have worked here may not work there. So what programming, what are we doing to ensure that we are listening to our community? So I hope that helps.
I do want to talk about the money stuff. And I know maybe this can be like lightning round, but I mean, we could talk about the limitations of the traditional bookstore business model or like capitalism in general, but I feel like there's the contradiction between like needing to pay our staff and our rent and wanting to provide books for folks who don't have access, who don't have ability to purchase them. So I guess just what are some of the successes that you found in connecting funding with people who need to get books in their hands? Like ideas for us as we're starting to come up with creative solutions.
I mean, I think part of it is when you do public events, the first time I'm queer trans bookstore owner and like I kind of thought like check, but then the first time we sold books at Pride, then it was like we sold more trans books that month after Pride than we had sold ever. So there's that like it's going to pay off in dividends. It just might be, a while down the road. And then the other part is like I think the more the customers are engaged in your community engagement, then when you decide to crowdfund, people are really excited to jump in. So that's kind of my quick answer.
So how do I give away books for free, right? So, I've been on a few TV shows and they've donated books. And then once you do that, other publishers say, hey, we want to give you books too. And as a bookstore in general, we get books all the time, ARCs, people donate books and things like that. So what do we do with all those books, right? I load them on my bus and give them away for free, but have the schools or the other organizations pay for the time that the bus is there. So I'm getting rid of a lot of books in bulk. I work with PepsiCo, and they guarantee, there's like a book guarantee, like a bar guarantee. So anything left over, they know that it goes on the bus and I'm donating it to the community because they've already paid for it. There are a few ways. And then once I go to a school, right, and they're like, this was great, what else can you do? So I'm like, okay, we do author visits. And then we have the schools buy the book in bulk and bring the authors to the schools. And they're like, okay, what else can you do? Well, I want to do a book festival. And then they're like, okay. So it's that first entry point. It's the bus rental is probably the lowest hanging fruit because they hear free and they hear free books. And sometimes I go in after a Scholastic's book fair when the kids can't afford the books and they're getting books for free. And they're like, wow, the books that Scholastic, you're not here, right? The books that you provided for free were better than the Scholastic Book Fair. Can you do a book fair? So it just keeps going and going and going. But I pace myself because I want to go in. As a bookstore owner, I had all these ideas and I want to do all the things, but I wanted to perfect things first. I did the bus rentals first. That's been like sustaining our business alone. And then, gradually saying, okay, we do author visits. Let's see how those work. And then parent engagement events and things like that. So I'm not going full speed ahead, no pun with my book bus, but I'm gradually growing and executing things and documenting and showing other schools, because when you work with one school, a school's like, wait a minute, that school had you there, we want you here. And it keeps going and keeps going and keeps going, and I'm grateful.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, well, we're gonna wrap because we're at time. Thank you all. Rate the session on your app. We're all here, and our contact information is there, and I think we all have cards. So thank you.
Thank you for listening to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app. Additional educational resources can always be found on the ABA website at www.bookweb.org. Happy reading!